that your best Zoolander impression?
Welcome, fools, to episode 42 of the Fantasy Foolz Football Podcast. And today we have a lot to go over. We've got our news that we're going to go over, our injuries, some returns, Trifecta, and then dive into our Week 8 recap. But starting it off, as we always do, Jordan, tell us about some news going around the NFL.
Not a whole lot of happened this week, but there are some big things. Anthony Richardson is officially benched for Joe Flacco. We'll get into how that's going to affect the Colts receivers moving forward. Deontay Johnson is now a Raven. And so it was what, a Deontay Johnson in a 6th-round pick for a 5th?
Yeah, I don't know how they got that so cheap. I don't understand how good he was and how good he has been in his career. How do you get him a 6th for only a 5th rounder? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, but they got him, I guess. I mean, it feels weird because I can't remember what the Steelers traded him for, but it feels like, does he just like complain hard when he doesn't want to be there anymore? So interesting trade there. The other
I don't think he complained any harder than Devontae Adams.
Man, yeah, that's fair, man. And Minnesota acquired Cam Robinson to replace their offensive tackle who went on the IR after the knee injury. That's a big deal. What do you guys think this says? I mean, we all know Minnesota wants to win now because Sam Darnold's playing well and Justin Jefferson's on fire. What does this say about Jacksonville, though?
I think it says exactly what you're saying. I think Jacksonville is pretty much on the downslopes. They kind of acknowledge it, and they're basically just folding in the towel.
Yeah, that's what it kind of seems like. And Minnesota, like you said, is going after that offensive line to help Sam Darnold. Vikings have been close. Every game they've played, it's been a win or a close win. So this is just another opportunity to keep moving that needle forward.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure what they traded it for, but it seems like between the Brian Thomas Jr. injury, Christian Kirk hasn't been playing great,
and they
just haven't been winning. So, like, it seems like they're waiting for next year to come around. Then you have the Jets, who lose in historic fashion. Mike, you want to tell us about that one?
Oh, yeah. This is so New York Jets. This is amazing. So the New York Jets lost after everyone basically said this is a shoo-in win against the New England Patriots this year. Well, the New York Jets became the first team in NFL history to lose a game where they scored at least 20 points, allowed fewer than 250 yards total, and didn't turn the ball over. Really, this is just one of those like historic fashion, like history lessons, if you will, where it's like, okay, you just tack on a whole bunch of small things and it just creates it to be a historical moment. But it's just funny that it happened to the Jets when they obviously invested so much this year and they just are crawling their way across any line that they're trying to. And they're just somehow staying relevant because the rest of their division is just also sucking.
I think the history that was made is just how awful the Jets organization is, and it is literally the graveyard for where NFL players go to die. I think that's the history we're making.
It really is. It really is, which is so sad because there's a couple of superstars that are basically leaving. But we don't need to dwell on that. We'll talk about the game a little bit more further on. But let's go into some injuries where, unfortunately, we did lose some other people for the season. Stephon Diggs had lost his ACL. He
lost it. Can't find it.
Can't find it.
Adios, amigos.
So, yeah, he's done for the season, which is sad because, again, he was actually looking pretty good for Houston. Christian Kirk, collarbone injury right here. He's out for the season as well. Then you had other people.
Did he lose his collarbone?
No, he did not lose it. That was just in 2. That was just in 2.
Reference, like, does Stephon Diggs say he lost his ACL?
No. It's not. It's just Tyler dwelling on one word again. It's super sad about this injury. Tyler and Jordan, come on. Hold it together, man.
Mike, Drake May lost himself.
I lost it like Stephon Diggs lost his ACL.
He did. All right, so Drake May Unfortunately, this is sad because he had a concussion. Everyone saw this one coming. The team is not good, and guess what? You throw him in there, he's just going to keep getting sacked. So this was just a preventable injury, in my opinion. He shouldn't be playing anyway, but he does look good.
In this play, though, he was running for the ball, and I don't think quarterbacks. I think this is the play where he ran up, right, and he got hit. I think that's the play.
I don't remember where the play happened. I think he was remember running, hearing he got a concussion. And
I think he was running the ball, and it's just funny to me because if that's the case, and I'm not 100%, but I think it is. If that's the case, I'm just surprised these quarterbacks haven't really learned their lesson.
I agree with that.
Down.
It amazes me how many quarterbacks don't know how to slide, but we're going to get hung up on here.
There's a reason why Cam Newton and RG3 are not playing. And Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady played as long as they did.
Yeah.
You know?
That's fair. All right, let's run through the rest of these injuries. Jordan Love with a groin injury. Unfortunately, he's going to be week to week. Yep. Yeah, he's running. He can't run very far with that groin.
No.
Jordan Mason has a shoulder injury.
Going to sprint through.
Jordan Mason is week to week. There was talk that he could have come back into the game, but Guerendo, or however you say his last, Guerendo, he actually was performing pretty well, so they kept him out to try and nurse him up. Brian Thomas Jr., this one's going to be sad. He's they had an MRI. They looked. It was more positive than they expected, but the initial report was 2 to 4 weeks. He's out, so he's really anywhere between. He's really anywhere between can play this week or potentially IR worthy. We're not really sure.
I checked in Sleeper before this. It said, he's week to week, and it looked, and they projected him points. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I don't expect him to play.
They had a clear indicator that he was out 2 to 4 weeks. So I'd say definitely look up his status. And honestly, I wouldn't play him probably even if he is good. Debo came back from injury and he's back hurt again. Ribs and oblique. He's day to day though. I expect him to come back. Keandre Miller, hamstring injury. He's only week to week, but he's pretty much never playing again. Tyrone Tracy, concussion again, week to week. Oh, man, this sucks because he was looking really good. I'm sure Jordan's going to want to talk about him a little bit more later on. And T. Higgins, my guy, he was out for week 8 totally. He's only day-to-day with a hammy, apparently, but it's so sad. He's just been so good when he plays, and he's just so crappy that he gets injured so much. But other people did come back, and these are really exciting. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, Tua Tagovailoa, Deebo Samuel, like I already said. Chris Olave, superstars came back this week, which was super exciting.
Yeah, it was definitely. Honestly, I think that Puka caught us all by surprise. I had no idea he was playing. I think a lot of people forgot to put him in our lineup. Now, again, it's a crapshoot if he was going to do good, right, coming off injury, but it was definitely a surprise for me to see Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back out on the field.
It really makes me a little sad with my trade that I was like thinking, okay, I did that trade to get Cooper Kupp back earlier, and no, I got Puka on the same week.
Moving along to our weekly trifecta, and this is our week 8 trifecta. Starting off with my surprise of the week, it had to be my waiver wire pickup, Cedric Tillman. We expected more from these Cleveland Browns wide receivers now that Jameson Winston was behind the helm. But I did not expect 7 catches, 9 attempts for 99 yards, 2 touchdowns, ending up the wide receiver 3 on the week. This was a huge waiver wire pickup. Let's hope it continues.
I love this selection, and I actually texted this to Tyler last week after our show. After waivers went through, I will say, I was very high on Cedric Tillman. I'm sorry to our viewers that I did not express as much excitement as I did, but I just want to make sure that this guy wouldn't end up taking him from me in the waiver wire. This guy was a great player, in my opinion, out of college. He's a big-bodied guy, physical. He really played the part, and now that he's actually going to be the guy with Amari Cooper out, I really think that there's might be more to come, especially with Jameis Winston at the helm. Great week. My surprise of the week was Jalen Hurts. Maybe that's not really fair to be a surprise because he's a superstar, but no one can expect 3 rushing touchdowns this week. So that alone created him to be the QB1. Hands down, basically won me and lost me in 2 different leagues this week.
Yeah.
Man,
it was tough to play against him.
Now, my surprise of the week was Brock Purdy. Simply, he's good, We expect him to be solid. We expect him to land right in that 8 to 13 range on a week-to-week basis. I was just surprised that this ended up being his best week. Going into it with everything going on with that offense, with Jordan Mason having some injury issues, George Kittle being questionable, Debo returning from having fluid in his lungs in the hospital, just surprised me a little bit that, like, boom, this was the week that things clicked. Perhaps this is a sign of things moving forward, and it's a good sign of him captaining the ship, I think, as for the 49ers as a team.
It's going to be interesting to see when they have to pay him.
Yeah,
that'll be
coming up
for sure.
Shortly.
After this year, they can.
My consistent of the week, and it's consistent not because every week he's super consistent, but it's Tucker Kraft. This week he was 3 for 3 for 78 yards and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft is the number 3 tight end, and if you were like me, I picked him up off the waivers. This is kind of a tight end who snuck in to your benches. This guy has performed not just this past week, but the week before he had 11 points, 23-14. I mean, he has performed in a scarce position. So Tucker Kraft, way to go. Keep it up, buddy.
Hey, scarce position for the year, but not for the week. I mean, happy tight end week, boys. I mean, that was great. But I will say this is my consistent of the week. I have Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he hasn't been around the whole season, but he's been dominant every single time he's been out there. I mean, this week he ended up giving you still 105 yards, 20 carries. That's 5 a carry and a touchdown. When he's in, he's an absolute lock, and he's a top 12 running back easy.
100%.
Moving on to another running back who's just been consistently awesome. He only had 2 weeks that he missed. I think he may have had his worst week, and it was still, 19.5 fantasy points in half PPR leagues. Joe Mixon has been awesome. And he proved last week, even when the receivers aren't on point, even when CJ Stroud isn't really on point, he still shows up.
I'm gonna make it even more crazy. He actually missed 3 weeks, so that's like 3.5 weeks, given the fact that he was out for injury, and he's still RB13.
In total points.
Total points.
That's nuts. He's been so consistent, and it's not like he boomed 1 week.
Right. I got to give him credit because I've always been very low on Joe Mixon, especially going into this year with the Texans. Mike, we've agreed we don't like Joe Mixon as a pick, and now I'm kind of leaning on that side. I
agree because I've always had the same thing, and he's always been injury prone, so he's still keeping that going. But he's just been so good this year.
Yeah, he's been real consistent. But moving on to my fool of the week. That is Fool for Duel the Fools, if you couldn't get it. No, sorry. Fantasy Fools. I'm just going to tell you my fool now. It's Amari Cooper. 1 reception for 2 attempts and 3 yards. He was practically useless. You could have had any other person on your wide receiving lineup, and you would have done better than he did. I expected much better things from Amari Cooper.
I did too. As someone who just traded a first-round pick for him a few weeks back in anticipation of the trade, I hope for better than this. Someone who didn't do a whole lot better, though, at the same position, and I think you're going to notice a trend with all of our disappointments here. With tight ends doing really well, it kind of really hurt the wide receivers, and mine was Drake London. Drake London in a game where there was nothing but offense. Atlanta versus Tampa Bay, 31-26, the repeat game where Kirk Cousins had 500 and something yards the last time they met. Drake London this week he had 4 receptions, 6 targets, 34 yards, and 1 first down. He gave you 5.6 points. You expected more from your wide receiver 1.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Moving on to my fool of the week, I went with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Simply, like, the Detroit Lions dominated this week, and I felt like everybody showed up, and I mean, St. Brown, from a football perspective, did his job. I'm sure, like, he hit his blocks. He distracted the defense as the number 1 receiver. From a fantasy perspective, he only got, 7.5 points. That came on 2 targets, 7 yards. And he got lucky he had the touchdown. So, I mean, it just seemed like one of those weeks that, like Mike has mentioned many times before. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Detroit, and you don't know who's not going to get to eat week to week. I'm just surprised it's the number one receiver in a game they just dominated.
Well, I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back here. I called this one last week. I said it was going to be the running backs, and it was not going to be Goff, and it was not going to be Amon-Ra.
I mean, and you got to remember too,
3 touchdowns,
Goff
87 yards.
Right, he had
for 87 yards.
But we'll get there.
Yes, we will. That was our weekly trifecta. Mike, bring us into honorable mentions before we talk about the recap.
Yep, absolutely. We can go into the honorable mentions. I did have a few here, and I got to say Sam Laporta. It was good to see him come back to life here. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 48 yards, 14.4 fantasy points, and he actually did well for a tight end this week. Unfortunately, he did it the same week as everybody else did. Marvin Harrison Jr. Hey, good to see him come back. Touchdown, 111 yards on 6 receptions. I love to see it. Hopefully it's a thing to go in the future. We'll get back to him later on though. Matt Stafford, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. I thought he looked absolutely fantastic, back to vintage form, and I do anticipate this being a thing in the future now that he's got his weapons back. Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts, both in the same game. I mentioned it before. Drake London was a disappointment. Well, that came at the hand of Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts feeding for him. Last guy I got to say, Joe Burrow, he was really close to being my disappointment of the week. He wasn't a true disappointment. He still gave you 13 points in some formats. I still view that as a disappointment, expecting a lot bigger things from Joe Burrow.
Yep, and that was our honorable mentions going into our Week 8 recap. Starting out with Thursday Night Football, we had the Minnesota Vikings versus the Los Angeles Rams. This was a great game to watch. It was great to see Stafford reconnect with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, as we talked about. Both of them had a solid fantasy week. Kupp with that touchdown and 51 yards, Nacua with his receptions, and he had a whopping 106 yards on his first game back with 7 receptions. That was the big story there. It does look like the Rams are coming back. From Minnesota side, Jones, Jefferson, Addison, all without a touchdown. And Darnold, he did play good for the first half, but for the second half of the game, but it wasn't that enough to win that game. Although they didn't call that penalty, which I know everyone's up in arms about, which was annoying.
Yeah, that was wild. That was a pretty obvious one, I gotta say. Like, he really did just face mask him. He turned his entire neck all the way around.
That was a bad one.
Yeah, that was a miss, but you can't blame the refs because it wasn't the Chiefs on the field. But we'll get to them. Don't you worry. Going into the next game, though, Philadelphia-Cincinnati. Again, I already touched on this game. I thought it was absolutely great to see Jalen Hurts get back into the end zone 3 times. Unfortunately, for a lot of people betting in FanDuel and all those other platforms, Saquon Barkley did not get into the end zone. But guess what? Can't do it every single week, despite the fact that I would love him to be honest. Other than that, I mean, you have like Barkley and Brown. They did still have a productive day. I mean, don't get me wrong. They absolutely had great performances, but they just didn't have you that superstar one that you were expecting. Chase had another great day, though. He had a great long touchdown, which I thought was fantastic. But other than that, that was really Joe Burrow's only touchdown, which I really was a little upset about because of the fact that I would really, 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 really like to see Joe Burrow actually put up that 50 number that I kind of predicted he would do in the beginning of the season. But he's not on pace to get there in the touchdown count. The last bit of snippet information I have to say here, I'm getting very, very interested in the fact that Chase Brown is really outsnapping Moss here.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I'm happy to see it as Chase Brown over. Sorry.
We'll talk about that more on our Week 9 preview next episode.
I will note that while Chase Brown did outsnap him, I believe Moss caught all 4 of his targets. Chase Brown did not, and he had a lot more receiving yards.
It's very weird about that. I actually didn't expect Moss to be the pass catcher in this category,
which leads to he's more confusion.
He's turning into that. He really is,
because you expected it to be flipped. But so moving on to the next match, we do have Baltimore versus Cleveland. What a match. Holy crap. Jameis Winston. Man, beating the team that's pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, they're number 2 or 3 in the power rankings, right behind the undefeated Chiefs. Lamar Jackson right now in the QB index on NFL.com. He's listed as number 1. Jameis Winston comes in and wins. What an awesome game. We did see him throw 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He was only sacked twice. He did have a fumble. The other person that you're looking at, he was already mentioned by Tyler. Cedric Tillman, I believe he had 2 touchdowns on the week. He was top 3 in fantasy for wide receivers, I believe, as well in the week. I don't know if he's always going to be top 3, but he's going to be a stud moving forward. And
I can promise you he's not going to always be top 3.
Yeah. But this week, he was. On the other side of the ball, it's not like Lamar had a bad week. He had 289 passing yards, went 23 for 38, and no interceptions there. He was just sacked 3 times and couldn't get the win. Him and Derrick Henry, though, still had a pretty good week fantasy-wise. Derrick Henry once again found the end zone. Now,
it was a while before he did, though. It was a while.
Yeah, it was a little while. The other person was Zay Flowers, who had 115 yards on 7 receptions. He just also couldn't find the end zone. And we're going to talk about how that may be a problem in future weeks moving forward.
Yes, we will. We talked about the Tennessee Titans and Detroit Lions game a little bit, but this was a total blowout. From the Tennessee side, Mike and I, we were all right. You didn't start a single Tennessee Titan except for Tony Pollard. But moving on to the Lions side, the Arby's and Laporta did produce. Gibbs, 11 carries. Monty, 9 carries, 33 yards and a touchdown. Monty with another receiving touchdown, and Gibbs with a rush touchdown. So definitely great to see those two still be the dual-headed back of the NFL right now. I think they're the best running back core right now in the NFL. Ridley, Pollard, Rudolph all end with a kind of a false good game. They ended up okay. Mason Rudolph, 22 for 38, 266, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Tony Pollard, 20 carries, 94 yards, and 3 receptions for 23. So that's kind of how the match ended up, but it was a total blowout by the Lions.
It really was. And I actually like how you added in Calvin Ridley there. I think Calvin Ridley actually was a sneaky good play here. He had 15 targets and 10 receptions. That's a lot. I mean, that's honestly, he might be actually one of those guys you want to start streaming a lot more often now that Hopkins is out of the way. But some guys who you really want to start playing now that someone else is out of the way, we're moving on to the next game, and it is going to be Indy versus Houston. Yes, Anthony Richardson is finally not at the helm.
We're going to talk about that next episode, Mike.
Sorry. You're right. I apologize.
We're talking the fans something to look forward to.
Anthony Richardson played awful.
That's fair. Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry. Do you want to know who didn't play awful, though? Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, like I already said, is so good. Josh Downs also had a really nice long touchdown. Honestly, even Anthony Richardson couldn't miss how open he was. So it was absolutely fantastic. Joe Mixon on the other side of the ball. I mean, the Texans, their offense is so weird to me. It's so star-studded. They have been dealing with injuries, but Joe Mixon is the only one who's actually proving to be a star. C.J. Stroud has shown in multiple throws in that game, he still has it. But it's just he's not getting a job done. They're not getting much more than 20-something points. So really, Joe Mixon is becoming the only locked-in player. And C.J. Stroud might be going toward my bench category, which I don't like saying. Even with Tank Dell, he got his touchdown. I don't know if I like him being the number 1 because with Stephon Diggs out, I don't think Dell's going to be a good, capable number 1 until Collins comes back, which may be next week. You got to look at that going forward, though.
Man, we'll see. We'll talk about that in next episode. But our next matchup was Green Bay versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville, as we kind of talked about already, due to them making a trade, they didn't do so great. And, unfortunately, the person who's been most fantasy relevant, it feels, Brian Thomas Jr., got hurt. He had a touchdown on 3 receptions. He did awesome. Outside of that, let's see. You had, just Bigsby didn't deliver in the way I was hoping he would, especially with Etienne out. That's just, I'm staying away from that offense. They've continued to prove that they're not great. Now, on the other side of the ball, you also had another injury pretty early on with Green Bay's Jordan Love. That was a bummer for me because I have him in I've got him in 2 out of my 6 leagues. So Yeah, that's no fun. Luckily, I also have Joe Burrow in that league, so we're good. But it's really hard to look at fantasy implications from this game moving forward at all. Josh Jacobs did what you expect him to do. He had a solid game. Tucker Kraft did too. Jaden Reed, he had 7.5 points, but what are you going to do when the backup QB's in? The other person who really did well is Romeo Dobbs. Had a decent game, putting up over 10 points.
Yeah.
I like Romeo Dobbs as a good play going forward.
I'm liking seeing how Josh Jacobs is performing within this offense. The first couple weeks he did struggle, but I love seeing how he has taken that primary role, literally the only one running the ball, and really, firing off with it and really showing that he's still a relevant running back. Moving on to the Arizona Cardinals versus the Miami Dolphins. It was a super tight game from the Miami Dolphins side. Tua had an average day. Devon Achane really came back with Tua behind the helm. That was great to see. Raheem Mostert, 2 touchdowns, so you got those kind of garbage points if you happen to start him. On the wide receiving core, Tyreek Hill did have a game, 6 receptions, 72 yards, but Devon Achane is really the primary conversation holder in that offense right now. On the Cardinals side, Kyler Murray had a great fantasy day with 307 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. James Conner saved himself with that 1 touchdown. He was only averaging 2.6 yards per carry, but that end zone rush really boosted his performance. Trey McBride and Marvin Anderson Jr., they are the big stories right now. Trey McBride, 9 receptions, 124 yards. Marvin Harrison, 6 receptions, 111 yards with a touchdown. Michael Wilson, also 31 yards with a touchdown. But this was a really great game. It was a shootout, and it really ended with the final seconds. So it was definitely a nail-biter.
Yeah, I'm just like I said before, I like seeing Marvin Harrison Jr. now all of a sudden excelling into this. Michael Wilson, even with another touchdown, I thought that was great. I mean, I had to play him in a couple of leagues just because I was running out of people because wide receivers getting injured everywhere. But honestly, I just think that this is going to be a great news for 2 teams that I think have offenses that are going to be revitalized going forward. 2 teams that I think are kind of crumbling on the other side. We have the Jets versus the New England Patriots. Let's see. Rodgers is just, again, he's not working with the New York Jets. The New York Jets are just being the New York Jets. And the defense, which everybody thought was going to be a super solid part of this this team, is just not. The defense is actually bottom tier. They are actually giving up far too many points against pretty much every position, and they can't stop the run at all. So this is a problem, even with them getting Adams in their offense, and they have really Adams becoming a Jet is only helping Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is the biggest benefactor, and he's now catapulted up in efficiency because of it. But I guess it's because he just can't separate from the number 1 corner. Drake May, like I said, we got hurt before, which is sad. But Ramondre Stevenson, it's just one of those things. Like he's a workhorse, which is great. I mean, but he's not very efficient. Like we already talked about, 20 carries, 48 yards total, 2 touchdowns. That's kind of nice, but I expect more out of him.
Yeah, but I did like that he had a great fantasy week.
Man, moving on to the next matchup, we have Atlanta taking on Tampa Bay, which is a rematch from an awesome game where Kirk Cousins just cooked. And not too unsurprisingly, but Kirk Cousins did exactly what we expected and exactly what he did to this defense last time. He had an awesome game. He threw 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and 276 yards. That's an awesome game. Then on the other players for Atlanta, Bijan, 13 carries, 63 yards, and he did find the end zone on a receiving touchdown where he was wide open. Don't know how.
Yeah.
The wide receiver who really performed here, it's Darnell Mooney. He got the touchdown where Drake London did, as Mike mentioned earlier. He kind of fell flat this week, and it was surprising considering he has the highest red zone target percentage or target share among the NFL wide receivers right now. So I expected him to have another awesome game. Didn't come through. Now, on the other side of the ball, you have Tampa Bay, who Baker, he was the big question mark, I think, going into this game, and he showed up showing he's a true competitor. He's still ready to sling it regardless of who he's throwing it to. He had 0 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 330 yards. I'm pretty sure he also had the most pass attempts with 50. And I don't think it was close. On the running side of the ball, you have Rashad White, 29 yards rushing, not great, but he did have 38 yards receiving and a touchdown there. And then Bucky Irving also contributed quite a bit. He put 84 yards up total, 7 receptions.
Bucky Irving is starting to look really good.
Yeah,
he is. The interesting part of this game, it had the top 2 tight ends of the week, and both of them had 2 touchdowns. K-Dot and Kyle Pitts, a national tight end day.
I have to say, Kyle Pitts, I might be. I hate how Kyle Pitts does
Might
this.
be clicking.
He literally got me to the point where I'm like, okay, he's done. I'm done. I'm out finally, and he's just bringing me back in. Quietly, he's tight end 4 on the season.
Yeah. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints versus the Los Angeles Chargers. This was a great game for Chargers and not a great game for the Saints. Saints really not much to talk about besides Alvin Kamara, 10 rushing attempts for 67 yards and 6 receptions for 55 yards. Could not find the end zone, though. And Chris Olave with 107 receiving yards also did not find the end zone. Well, I don't think they found the end zone at all in this game. I think they actually got 2 field goals and a safety. It was interesting to see that they benched Spencer Rattler.
Excuse you.
Thank you. Spencer Rattler for Jake Haener. And I think it's just going to be a crapshoot where this offense is going forward unless Derek Carr comes back. It was great to see Justin Herbert finally start to throw the ball. 20 completions, 32 attempts, 279 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Both of those touchdowns went to my guy, Mr. Ladd McConkey, 6 receptions, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a fantasy week. I think he might have been wide receiver 1, if I'm not mistaken. He
had a absolutely great week, and I would not expect it to continue.
I will expect to continue.
Really?
So, yes. I've said it before. Ladd McConkey, this is just great things to come. Granted, Saints, terrible defense, but I think this is brighter roads ahead.
See, I don't know. I think that this is one of those games. I think Justin Herbert basically was there, and he basically said, hey, remember, I could still do this, but I don't think he's going to. I think this team likes to run the ball too much, but I mean, that maybe I'm wrong. I've been out on Ladd McConkey, and I continue to be, I guess. But moving on to the next game, Buffalo versus Seattle. I mean, there's really not much to unpack here. I mean, James Cook still looks absolutely dominant, even with Ray Davis just in the back. I mean, Ray Davis might work his way into it at some point, but this is James Cook's show. All the wide receivers, though, this is what surprised me. All the wide receivers were involved. I mean, Shakir still looked very, very involved, and I expected a lot more of those shares and a lot more of those targets to go Cooper's way, and they did not. So we already talked about Cooper. He was a little bit of a disappointment. No, he was a lot of bit of a disappointment. Let's be real. But other than that, just everyone else was involved, not so much him. But in Seattle, man, I mean, Geno, come on. Geno had to come up and step up a little bit more. Same with Walker. They both had bad games. And Walker, I'm pretty sure he just ended up getting taken out, to be honest, because when he got took out, they just let Zach Charbonnet just run the ball a lot more. I think it's a product, though, of DK Metcalf coming out. JSN is not really a wide receiver 1, so they had to kind of let him go. I mean, it just is what it is, but I think you got to move on expecting that when DK's in, the offense will cook a lot more, and Geno will do a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. I think the offense is still a contender. Geno Smith's putting out, and with Metcalf in, they've got 3 targets, so it's a lot of room to play defense against. Moving on to the Carolina versus Denver game, Bryce Young continues to struggle even with Andy Dalton now. Bryce Young still couldn't do anything. Coker and Leggett also both got a touchdown. It was nice to see that they both did something. And Cortland Sutton, 11 targets, 100 yards. So we didn't really see too much out of either team, but this is kind of like the boring game of the week.
I don't know. I think I had the boring game of the week.
Well, moving on to Kansas City Chiefs versus the Las Vegas Raiders. It was my upset of the week, and it turned out to be close, but it didn't happen. Definitely DeAndre Hopkins had a quiet debut in this offense. He did start producing some fantasy relevancy to him. Now, we also had Kareem Hunt, 21 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown. We had Patrick Mahomes. He continues to kind of just be average, 27 completions, 38 attempts, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. This Chiefs team is not looking like they have been. They're winning games, but Mahomes is making a lot of mistakes. Travis Kelce, again, also fantasy dominant, 90 receiving yards for 1 touchdown. From the Raiders side, not too much to talk about. Gardner Minshew had a decent week, 24 completions, 2 touchdowns. We didn't see much from Alexander Madison unless you're in a PPR league. Brock Bowers put up something. Jacoby Myers did get a touchdown, which was nice to see. But besides that, there's not too much to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. I think really what it comes down to is KC is a great team, and they are a great team, not like they usually are. It's all defense. Their defense is actually unstoppable, and no matter what you do, you can't seem to produce against them, and their offense doesn't have to do anything because of it. That's what I'm realizing.
They've got the refs on their side.
They do have the refs on their side, which definitely helps. But I think the next person who might get the refs on their side all the time, it might be Caleb, despite the fact that he's struggling. But you know what? This game, I was super excited about this game, and I was really wanting to see what Washington was going to do against what I consider one of the best defenses in the league. And man, did they produce. Washington is looking actually scary good with Jaden Daniels at the helm. Jaden Daniels did super well against the Chicago Bears defense, and Caleb really struggled against the Washington defense, which was surprising. Swift still had a great game. I mean, I actually thought that he was going to have a pretty bad game this go around, but 129 yards on 18 carries and a touchdown. He's still looking great. He even leaped over somebody. Swift is a little guy. I think he's like little in the NFL, and he actually leaped over somebody, which was great. McLaurin is doing a great job being a top 15 wide receiver week in, week out. One of those plug and plays. You don't ever take him out of your lineup unless he's on a bye. And the only other person that I think is really worthy is Brian Robinson is just staying productive. He's just doing really well. He's kind of staying like in that realm where it's like maybe RB 24 to 15. I mean, he's going to keep producing, keep getting those goal line touches, but he's losing a little bit of efficiency. That's what I've noticed in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, man. Now we are moving on to the next matchup, which is going to be Dallas versus San Francisco. So you've got on Dallas' side of the ball, Dak, 2 touchdowns but 2 interceptions. He has not been all that great this season. Now, their offense just isn't clicking like it was last year. I believe CeeDee Lamb, he was number 1 on the week by a long shot, actually. 2 touchdowns, but it's not like a consistent thing this season.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think they're missing Cooks a lot.
Yeah, because
being another threat. Look how often the ball got to CeeDee Lamb, but they need another threat because obviously nothing's happening until the last 10 minutes of a game.
Yeah, and nothing's happening there. They're just not putting up enough offense.
I don't think it's Cooks as much as they're missing their offensive line. They lost so much of their offensive line.
Yeah,
it just struggles.
Now on the others, with the tight ends, you had George Kittle, who on National Tight End Day, who he was the founder, I believe, he got a touchdown and had another awesome top 5 week. Now, unfortunately, no Jordan Mason, but you did have Isaac Guerendo, who he had an awesome week, so it was a really good game.
Still looks solid, which is making me think that literally it doesn't matter as long you play whatever running back is available for the 49ers.
Yeah, pretty much, and also Purdy seems to always keep it going. He's just keeps it sturdy. Unlike that.
Moving on to the last matchup, that was the Monday Night Football game, New York Giants versus Pittsburgh Steelers. It was a very slow game for Monday Night Football. From the Giants side, Daniel Jones just continues to disappoint. 1 interception, 264 yards. He did find his guys, Darius Slayton and Malik Neighbors. Surprised it was Slayton, but he did have 108 yards. I don't think this is anything fantasy worthy because Malik Neighbors still is dominant at the wide receiver position. Tyrone Tracy.
I want to talk about Malik Neighbors. I was actually really scared though. He had a couple of drops that he should not have had.
But he's coming off a concussion. I'm not worried about it.
I'm not worried about him, but I was definitely. It was something to monitor.
I'd be worried about Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I'm not worried about
Neighbors. The ship has sailed. Ship has sailed on Daniel Jones.
I'm not worried about Neighbors. I think like if you watch a few of those passes he dropped, it hit him in his knees.
Yeah,
like
one was in his hands. Like
yeah. I mean, his hands were where they should have been, but the pass he should have had them, but the passes could have been better.
Yeah,
fair.
From the Steelers side, Russell Wilson starting to look like the Russell Wilson of old. 20 completions, 28 attempts, 278 yards, and a touchdown. Najee Harris had a huge game. Did not find the end zone, but he had 19 carries for 114 yards. That's an average of 6 yards per carry, which is insane. Also, George Pickens. Now, from a fantasy side, he didn't get you the points you wanted, but keep the confidence in him with Russell Wilson behind the helm because he was literally inches from having a monster week. He almost had that touchdown in the end zone.
Oh my God.
He had a couple passes called back. I would not worry about George Pickens with Russell Wilson throwing the ball.
That should have been a catch. That should have been a touchdown.
No, it should not have.
It should totally have been a touchdown.
It should not have been a touchdown.
I know what you're saying. By the rule, it should not be. But that is one of those plays that changes rules.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Then
because he got two taps of his
same foot. But as the rule stands, you gotta get both feet. So
yeah.
But I understand, Mike. It should be changed after that play. I agree. It should be changed.
You're right. I'm with you. It should, by rule, it was not, but it is going to change the rule.
Last point, if you didn't get a chance to see it, check out the play where George Pickens is like going in to tackle the guy after the fumble recovery, and at the other Pittsburgh player tackles the Giants player. Pickens can't stop himself and does like this WWE move, and it looks like he just body slams them both. And he is, oh man, they talked about that on ESPN. He always has something in every game that makes him entertaining.
I saw that and I just didn't understand why. It looked like he jumped 10 feet in the air just to do a whole elbow down.
Check it out.
But anyway, that was our Week 8 recap. Moving on to the Duel of the Fools results for Week 8. We had Cousins came away. Javonte Williams and DeAndre Swift. Oh. We talked about Swift. He blew it out of the water. Najee Harris had a great game. Jordan Mason didn't. That hurt a lot of your fantasy rosters. Because Devon Achane had a better game than Jahmyr Gibbs. Brian Thomas Jr. outperformed Malik Neighbors. Unfortunately, T. Higgins ended up not playing with his hamstring injury. CeeDee Lamb out by a mile outscored Drake London, and Hunter Henry continues to be a favorite of Drake May, outperformed Pat Freiermuth. Leaving the weekly results, I won the lead with 5 correct points. Mike came in second, surprisingly. Mike, you might have broken your losing streak. I was
so happy to get half.
Yes. And Jordan, you gave up every single part of you in Duel of the Fools and had one correct guess. You get the record on both ends of the spectrum. Most guesses wrong in a week and most guesses right in a week.
I know.
Leaving the overall standings, Jordan and I are tied in first for correct guesses at 30 apiece. Mike is sadly in last at 25. But Jordan
making my way back.
Jordan is ahead in weeks 1 with 5, then me with 3, Mike again in last with 2. Well, that was our Duel of the Fools recap. Mike, you cannot. And on that note, it is time to end. Thank you for listening. We look forward to seeing you on next episode for our Week 9. We're already almost halfway through the season. Week 9 preview. See you later, fools. Give us a like, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you later this week.